Hello, my name's Lesley Kelly and I'm going to be reading a bit from my latest novel, Murder at the Music Factory, which is part of a series of novels about the health enforcement team who are a bunch of people who are investigating crime in Edinburgh where there is a pandemic raging, so all a little bit topical. Anyway, the bit that I'm reading from, there has been the Minister for Virus Policy at the Scottish Government, her secretary, Paul Shore, has been shot, so they're investigating that. So, Carlotta Carmichael had been put in an empty waiting room. An armed guard stood in the doorway, his eyes constantly flicking up and down the corridor. He nodded to Stuttle as he approached. "Sir." "Where's Bob Ellis?" "Mr. Shore's in theatre. Mr. Ellis went with him to oversee security arrangements, sir." "How is Paul?" asked Mona. "Don't know." The guard appraised her for a moment before adding, "Ma'am." Carlotta was on her phone, her coat neatly folded across her lap. She looked remarkably calm for someone who'd recently survived an assassination attempt. In Mona's police days, she'd been used to dealing with civilians' hysterics in the aftermath of shootings or stabbings, or supporting witnesses who'd been shocked into silence by their experience. The MSP for Upper Nithsdale and chair of the Parliamentary Virus Committee appeared to be made of sterner stuff and not in any immediate need of trauma counselling. Carlotta ended the call as soon as they walked in, without much in the way of leave-taking. Mona wondered which particular civil servant was bearing the brunt of her fury in the absence of Paul Shore. Stuttle made his move. "Minister." "I'm not leaving, Cameron, not until Paul's out of theatre and we know he's okay." She looked genuinely upset now. It was a side of Mona that she hadn't seen before, and she began to entertain the possibility that Carlotta Carmichael might actually care about something beyond herself, her husband, and their shared ambitions. "We're all concerned about Paul, Minister, but we really need to get you somewhere more secure." He gestured towards the door, a mute suggestion that she might want to get weaving. The suggestion was noted and ignored. "The last safe area you suggested turned out to be anything but." "I didn't suggest that, Minister. You received a note telling you to head there, and we received a note purporting to be from you asking me to meet you there." Carlotta's face went through a number of different expressions as she took this in. "We were set up?" "It appears that way." "Is this the work of Bryce Henderson?" There was a brief pause before Stuttle conceded, "Possibly." "How was this allowed to happen?" Carlotta's voice was so loud that the armed guard turned round in alarm, his gun poised. Stuttle didn't say anything, his eyes firmly fixed on a point just behind Carlotta's left shoulder. She turned and stared at Mona for a second, as if estimating whether she had anything to offer to this conversation. Apparently she didn't, because Carlotta swivelled back to Stuttle. "If you come out of this mess with your job, Cameron, I'll be very surprised." Not a single muscle on his face responded. "I'll go and find Bob Ellis, and then I'm afraid you will have to leave. We really can't guarantee your safety here." Mona wondered exactly how upset he would be if someone were to shoot Carlotta before she left the hospital. Stuttle turned his expressionless face in her direction. "Please discuss with Miss Carmichael any memory she might have of receiving the note." He exited without a backward glance, leaving her alone in the lion's den. Carlotta frowned. "I remember you." The look in her face suggested she wasn't overjoyed to be renewing the acquaintance. Mona didn't blame her. The last time they'd been in the room together, there had been a discussion about some impropriety on the part of her husband. She could probably have lived quite happily, never bumping into Mona again. "Yeah." Mona sat down on one of the plastic chairs and pulled out a notebook. "Can you recall anything about the man who gave you the note?" She shook her head, the irritation she'd shown to Stuttle earlier, now being redirected at Mona. "No, I didn't see him. Someone passed the note to Paul and he updated me." "A policeman?" She thought for a minute. "I think that's what Paul said." "Mainly we were concerned about what a ridiculous place Cameron Stuttle was suggesting for a safe area. Although nothing surprises me anymore with the head of the Scottish Health Enforcement Partnership. Enforcement? Ha! You can't even keep key members of our staff safe." Mona was pretty sure that the security of civil servants wasn't actually Stuttle's job, but she decided against raising the issue. "So you didn't personally see the man with the note?" Carlotta shook her head, staring at her immaculately manicured hands. Her dejection reactivated Mona's earlier sympathy. "Paul's getting really good care here, Minister. They'll be doing all they can." Carlotta's head snapped up. "I want to be there when he gets back from theatre." I'm really not sure that will be possible. Mr. Stuttle, I don't care what Cameron Stuttle says. Make it possible. When Paul comes round, he's going to be spouting all kinds of nonsense and possibly things that are classified. I don't want anyone without security clearance in his room. But the nurses, will be able to get them to sign something. Bob Ellis should be able to sort that out. Carlotta was staring at her as if she expected some response. As the only retort she could think of was, "You're being ridiculous, Minister," she was delighted to be spared the need to reply as the door opened and Stuttle reappeared. Her relief was short-lived as Bob Ellis trooped in right behind him. Mona felt an overwhelming desire to punch him, although given his size and solidity, it would have had all the impact of a fly landing on a bull. Stuttle and Carlotta might be right to have faith in Bob's ability to resolve difficult issues. Although no one was rushing to explain to her what his actual job was, it was definitely one that involved sorting out messes for people in power. Bob, Carlotta got to her feet. Thank God. These people are being very awkward. Everyone's just concerned about your safety, Minister. I'm concerned about national security. She grabbed Bob's arm, her long pink nails digging into his biceps. Paul might reveal confidential information as he comes round. Can we get some nurses with security clearance over here? Assuming he lives through the operation, Minister, said Stuttle quietly. He's not going to die. Don't be ridiculous. There was a silence that stretched on too long. Eventually, Bob broke it. He is very ill, Minister. Carlotta redirected her fury at her favourite target. I'm holding you responsible for this, Cameron. Keeping tight hold of Bob's arm, she reached for her coat and bag with her free hand. Come on, Bob. I'm sure you can find me somewhere properly secure. We can discuss Paul's nursing cover while we drive. The door slammed behind them. The hard-faced bitch didn't once ask how Paul was actually doing, Stuttle said. Not once. What do you think she's worried about Paul saying? Is it just a genuine concern about security or something in particular? Knowing Miss Carmichael, I'd imagine it's something very specific and probably much more closely related to her own personal future than to a matter of national security. And seeing as she has herself pointed out that I may not have a job after this, I see it as strongly in my own interest to find out what it is she's worrying about.